The sky was soft and pale, covered in a quiet blanket of clouds. Tiny snowflakes drifted through the air like feathers, falling slowly, peacefully. In the small northern village of Skarn, winter had settled gently over the land. White snow hugged every rooftop, every tree branch, and every winding path. The world seemed to breathe slower in the cold, as if resting beneath the snow's quiet touch. Eirik stood at the edge of the village, his wool cloak wrapped tightly around his shoulders. He was 16 winters old, tall for his age, with kind eyes the color of a gray-blue sky. His hands were warm inside thick mittens, and his boots sank into the snow as he walked. He wasn't in a hurry. He liked to walk slowly, listening to the sounds of winter, the soft crunch of snow beneath his feet, the gentle whistle of wind between the trees, and the distant caw of a sleepy raven perched on the longhouse roof. Everything was calm here. Everything was still. Other boys in the village liked to run and shout, to swing wooden swords and pretend to be warriors. But Eirik wasn't like them. His heart beat a little quieter, a little softer. He loved the sound of stories more than the clash of blades, and he often dreamed of places far beyond the snowy hills, places where the sea sparkled like glass and the sky sang with stars. As he walked past the longhouses, he waved to the old weaver, who sat on a bench wrapped in thick blankets. Her hands moved slowly across her loom, creating warm cloth for the villagers. She smiled and nodded, and Eirik smiled back. Her face was gentle, like a warm fire on a cold night. At the edge of the village, where the snow lay deepest and the trees grew tallest, Eirik stopped. There, just beyond the pine trees, the fjord stretched wide and silent. Frozen mist drifted above its surface, and the water moved slowly, half covered in thin sheets of ice. The mountains beyond looked like sleeping giants, their peaks dusted with snow. Eirik sat on a smooth rock by the water's edge and looked out at the fjord. He pulled his knees close to his chest and breathed in the crisp, clean air. His breath came out in white clouds. "This is my favorite place," he whispered to himself. Every day, when his chores were done, he came here to think. He didn't always know what he was thinking about, but it felt good to sit, to wonder, to dream. Today, he was thinking about a dream he'd had the night before. In it, he was on a boat made of silver wood, sailing across a sea that sparkled under the stars. There were no battles, no storms, just quiet waves and gentle wind. He didn't know where he was going, but it felt peaceful, and the stars seemed to whisper kind words to him. He thought about telling someone, maybe his sister, Freya. She was only 9, but she always listened with big eyes and an open heart. She believed in dreams and magic, and she never laughed at his stories. She said he had a soft soul, and Eirik didn't mind that. Behind him, snow crunched softly. Eirik turned to see Freya walking toward him, wrapped in a fur cloak that dragged a little in the snow. Her cheeks were rosy from the cold, and her smile warmed the air around her. "I knew I'd find you here," she said, sitting beside him. Eirik smiled. "You always do." Freya looked out at the fjord. "It's quiet today." "It's always quiet," he replied, "but it's a good kind of quiet." Freya was quiet for a moment, then looked at him. "Did you have another dream?" Eirik nodded. "Yes, I was sailing." She tilted her head. "Where to?" "I don't know. Somewhere peaceful. There were stars above me, and they felt like they were speaking." Freya's eyes sparkled. "What did they say?" Eirik thought for a moment. "They didn't use words. It was more like a feeling, like they were telling me to keep going, even if I didn't know the way." Freya leaned against his shoulder. "That sounds like a nice dream." It was. They sat together in silence, watching the slow movement of the fjord. A bird flew low across the water, its wings almost touching the surface. The world felt soft, like it was wrapped in a wool blanket. Back in the village, smoke curled gently from chimneys. It was almost time to go home. Their mother would be stirring the evening stew, and their father would be carving wood by the fire. The warmth of home waited for them, but Eirik didn't move yet. He liked this moment sitting with Freya, the snow beneath their boots, the quiet world around them. He closed his eyes for a moment and listened, not just to the sounds, but to the stillness in between. There was something sacred in the stillness, something deep and kind. I think, he said softly, that one day I'd like to leave the village, just for a little while, to see what's beyond the mountains, to follow the stars. Freya looked up at him. Can I come? Eirik smiled. Of course. She beamed and rested her head back on his shoulder. They stayed like that until the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting soft, golden light over the snow. Then, slowly, they stood and began the walk home. Eirik took one last look at the fjord and the mountains beyond. The snow crunched gently beneath his feet. As they reached the village, the smell of stew drifted through the air. Lights glowed warmly in the windows. A dog barked once and then settled. The world was settling to preparing for sleep. Inside the longhouse, the fire crackled softly. Their mother handed them warm bowls of stew, and their father smiled with his calm, quiet eyes. Freya curled up with a blanket, and Eirik sat beside the hearth, his mind still half on the dream. When it was time for bed, he lay down on his soft furs and looked up at the wooden beams above him. The stars outside were hidden behind the roof, but he could still feel them gentle and distant, yet close in a way that only dreams could explain. As sleep began to take him, he remembered the snow beneath his feet, the soft hush of the fjord, and the promise in the stars' silent song. And with that peaceful thought, Eirik drifted into sleep, his heart full, his spirit calm, and the world outside wrapped in snow and silence. The wind outside whispered through the trees, brushing softly against the wooden walls of the longhouse. Inside, the air was warm and still. The fire in the hearth crackled quietly, casting soft orange light that danced across the wooden floor and stone walls. It was the kind of warmth that reached not just the skin, but the heart. Eirik sat close to the fire, wrapped in a wool blanket. He had just finished his bowl of stew, and now he was watching the flames with calm eyes. Freya lay nearby on a thick fur rug, her head resting on a small pillow stuffed with feathers. She was humming one of the lullabies their mother used to sing when they were small. The melody drifted through the air like smoke, light and slow. Their mother was sitting near the fire, sewing patches onto a wool cloak. Her fingers moved gently, carefully, and her face was soft with quiet focus. The firelight made her golden hair glow like candlelight. Every now and then, she looked up and smiled at her children. Her smile felt like home. Their father sat across from her, carving a small wooden horse from a block of pine. He didn't speak much, but his presence filled the room like the fire did, steady, warm, and always there. The smell of the wood mixed with the scent of herbs that hung from the beams. Above, lavender, pine, and dried thyme filled the air with a calming fragrance. Eirik shifted slightly and looked at his mother. "Mama," he said in a quiet voice, "can you tell us a story?" She paused her sewing and looked at him with gentle eyes. "A story?" Freya sat up quickly. "Yes, please. A peaceful one." Their father chuckled softly, his carving knife still in hand. "Let her sew in peace, little ones," he said kindly. But their mother only smiled. She placed her sewing in her lap and leaned back in her chair. "All right," she said, her voice like soft wool. "A story by the fire sounds just right." She looked at the flames for a moment, as if they would remind her what to say. Then she began. "Long ago," she said, "before this village was built, before the trees had names, and before the river knew the songs of the people, there was a young woman named Leora. She lived deep in the north, in a cottage made of stone, where the snow never melted and the stars always shone bright." Freya leaned in, eyes wide. Eirik rested his chin on his hands and listened. Leora was kind, their mother continued, but she was alone. Her family had gone to the stars, and she had no one left but her own quiet heart. So, each night, she lit a fire in her hearth not just for warmth, but for company. She spoke to the flames, and though they never answered with words, they seemed to listen. Their mother's voice softened even more. One winter, the snow fell harder than ever before. The wind howled, and the sky turned white. People from nearby villages were lost in the storm. But Leora, with her gentle hands and warm hearth, opened her home to anyone who came to her door. She had little, but she shared all she had. Eric felt something warm inside his chest. He thought of how his mother always made sure everyone had enough to eat, even when supplies were low. He thought of how she always noticed when someone needed comfort. The people called her the Flame Keeper, she said, because in the darkest season, her fire was a light of hope, and when spring finally came, they helped her build a new home, bigger, stronger, filled with love and laughter. The story ended like a sigh. The fire crackled softly, and the longhouse felt even warmer than before. I like that story, Freya said. She sounds like Mama. Their mother laughed quietly and touched Freya's hair. I only hope to be like her. Eirik looked at the fire again. The flames really do feel like they listen. They do, their father said, setting his wooden carving down. If you sit quietly, you can almost hear what they're saying. Eirik nodded. He believed it. As the fire burned lower, the room grew dimmer, but not colder. The heat stayed deep in the walls and in their hearts. Outside, snow continued to fall in slow, silent flakes, but inside, time seemed to stretch like a yawn. Their mother began to hum. It was the same lullaby she had sung when they were little, soft, slow, with a melody like the sea. Freya curled up on the fur rug, and Eirik rested his head on a folded blanket. His eyes felt heavy, but not in a tired way. In a peaceful, gentle way. His father added one more log to the fire, and the flames rose just enough to glow again. Shadows danced on the walls, and the whole longhouse seemed to breathe with warmth and safety. Will you dream tonight? Freya asked, her voice sleepy. I hope so, Eirik replied. Maybe about Leora and her fire. Maybe she'll be sailing too, Freya murmured. Maybe, Eirik whispered. Their mother leaned down and kissed each of them on the forehead. Her lips were warm, her touch like sunlight through clouds. Sleep, my loves, she said. The hearth will keep us safe tonight. Eirik closed his eyes. His thoughts drifted like the falling snow's slow, peaceful light. He imagined a silver boat sailing under the stars, with Leora standing at the front, her hearth fire glowing even on the waves. He imagined her smile, kind and strong, lighting the way. And in the longhouse, the fire burned gently on. It was more than heat. It was comfort. It was home. The fire in the longhouse had burned low, and the wind outside had quieted to a gentle sigh. The village of Skarn was fast asleep. Snowflakes floated slowly from the sky, settling like soft feathers on rooftops, branches, and paths. All was still. Inside, Eirik lay on his bed of thick furs, his blanket pulled up to his chin. The warmth of the fire still lingered in the air, and the soft breath of his sister Freya could be heard nearby. The night wrapped around them like a peaceful lullaby. Eirik blinked slowly, his eyes heavy. As his thoughts drifted, so did his body, until sleep gently pulled him into a dream. He found himself standing at the edge of the fjord, just as he had done many times before. But something felt different. The water was not frozen, and there was no snow on the ground. The sky above was dark blue, full of stars, so many stars, and they all shimmered like silver dust. The sea was calm, smooth like glass. A soft glow shimmered on its surface, and the air smelled faintly of salt and pine. Eirik looked down and saw a small boat resting at the shore. It was made of pale wood that shimmered in the starlight, and it rocked gently with the rhythm of the tide. It had no oars, no sail, and yet Eirik knew it was waiting for him. He stepped into the boat, and it floated silently away from the shore. There was no sound but the quiet lapping of water and the distant call of a bird. The boat glided forward, as if guided by an invisible hand, smooth and steady. Eirik sat in the center of the boat, his hands resting on his lap. He looked up at the sky. The stars above were moving, not fast, but slowly drifting, as if dancing across the heavens. One bright star blinked gently, and Eirik thought it looked almost like it was winking at him. He smiled. A light breeze brushed against his face, soft and cool. It carried a scent he didn't recognize, fresh, sweet, like blossoms he had never seen. Somewhere in the distance, he heard a soft tune. It was not sung with words, but with sound alone, like the hum of the earth or the whisper of dreams. It made his heart feel light, as though it were floating too, as the boat moved farther. Eirik saw small islands dotting the sea. Each one was different. One had tall grass that swayed without wind. Another had glowing stones that sparkled in soft colors. One had trees with silver leaves that shimmered with moonlight, even though there was no moon. The world around him felt like a secret only dreams could show. He wasn't afraid. In fact, he had never felt so calm. The sea, the sky, the stars, they felt like old friends, like they had always known him. There was no hurry, no worry, only peace. As he drifted, Eirik noticed a figure standing at the edge of a nearby island. It was a woman wrapped in a long cloak. Her hair flowed like the sea itself, and her eyes glowed softly. She raised a hand in greeting. Though they were far apart, Eirik felt warmth in her gaze. She said nothing, but he heard her voice in his heart. "Keep following the stars," it said gently. "They know the way." The boat turned slightly, gliding past her island, and Eirik watched until she was only a shadow among the trees. Soon, the sea began to glow. Beneath the surface, lights swirled, soft blues, greens, and purples like a quiet river of stars moving beneath the boat. Eirik leaned over the side, watching in awe. Tiny glowing fish swam below, their bodies trailing sparkles behind them. One swam close and looked up at him with round, curious eyes. Then it disappeared into the depths, leaving a trail of light behind. The boat slowed, and the song in the distance grew clearer, though it still had no words. It was like a lullaby, one that filled the heart instead of the ears. Eirik closed his eyes and listened, letting it wash over him like warm water. In that moment, he felt something deep inside. Not just peace, but something even softer, a quiet kind of joy. It was the feeling of being where you belong, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. The sea seemed to whisper this truth to him over and over. You are enough, just as you are. Eirik placed a hand over his chest and breathed deeply. He wished he could stay in this moment forever, and maybe he did, because the next time he opened his eyes, the boat had returned to the edge of the fjord. The snow was back, falling softly. The stars were still above, but fading into morning. He stepped out of the boat, his boots crunching lightly in the snow, and turned to look at the sea one last time. The boat was gone, but Eirik didn't feel sad. He felt full of something quiet and strong. He woke slowly, the warmth of his bed still surrounding him. Sunlight peeked through the small window, painting golden shapes on the wooden wall. Freya was still asleep, curled up with her blanket. The fire in the hearth had turned to glowing embers. Eirik sat up, placing his hand over his chest, just as he had in the dream. He remembered the glowing sea, the woman on the island, and the song without words. He smiled softly. The dream had felt real, like a gift, a reminder that even in the coldest season, even when the world feels still and small, there is wonder waiting out on the sea, under the stars, and deep inside the heart. And with that thought, Eirik stood, stretched quietly, and walked toward the fire. The day had begun, but the dream stayed with him like a gentle light. glowing deep within. The sun rose slowly over the village of Skarn, casting golden light across the snow-covered roofs. The air was cold and still, but the light made everything glow softly, like the whole world had been touched by a kind hand. Eirik stood outside the longhouse, pulling on his warm cloak. His dream of the glowing sea and the boat of silver wood still lingered in his mind like a warm memory. It had been 3 days since that dream, and though he hadn't spoken of it much, something inside him had changed. He felt it each morning when he woke, and each night as he stared into the fire. A quiet longing, a pull toward something more, something just beyond the edge of the known world. That morning, Eirik decided to visit the old shipwright, Olaf. Olaf lived in a small wooden house near the edge of the fjord. His yard was filled with long planks of pine and curved ribs of half-built boats. Though he was older than most in the village, his hands were strong, and his smile was warm. He had built nearly every fishing boat and trade vessel the village used. But more than that, Olaf was known for his gentle ways. He spoke kindly, moved slowly, and always listened with care. Eirik walked down the snowy path, each step making a soft crunch beneath his boots. The fjord sparkled in the light, and smoke curled gently from Olaf's chimney. When he arrived, Olaf was already outside, sanding a long piece of wood. "Good morning, lad," Olaf said, without looking up. His voice was deep, but soft, like a drum played gently. "What brings you out so early?" Eirik stepped closer. "I had a dream about the sea and a boat. A very quiet boat, made of light wood. It sailed without wind or oars." Olaf stopped, sanding. He looked at Eirik with curious eyes, then gave a small smile. "That sounds like a dream worth listening to." Eirik nodded. "I don't know what it means, but I want to build something that can carry me far." Olaf studied the boy for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Then you should learn how to build with your hands, and also with your heart." Without another word, Olaf handed Eirik a smooth wooden tool. "Come," he said, "we'll begin." And so, the lesson started. Each morning, Eirik walked through the snow to Olaf's shop. The old man taught him how to feel the grain of the wood, how to tell if it was ready to bend, how to listen for the tiny sounds it made when it was being shaped. "Wood speaks, if you're quiet enough to hear," Olaf would say. At first, Eirik's hands were unsure. He held tools too tightly or moved too fast. But Olaf never scolded him. Instead, he would gently guide Eirik's fingers or take the tool and demonstrate slowly, saying, "Like this, lad, let it flow." They worked in peaceful silence most days. The only sounds were the scrape of sandpaper, the tap of a wooden mallet, or the soft calls of birds near the water. It wasn't loud or exciting, but to Eirik, it felt right. The rhythm of the work calmed him. The scent of pine filled his nose, and the cool air on his cheeks kept him present. During breaks, Olaf would share small stories about boats he had built long ago, about the ocean's moods, or about the stars that guided sailors home. One day, as they sat by the fire drinking warm broth, Olaf looked at Eirik and said, "The sea is not always kind, but it always tells the truth. You must carry that truth in your heart when you build a vessel. Not for war, not for pride, but for journey, for peace." Eirik nodded. He understood. His dream had not been about escape or glory. It had been about something softer, something like hope. Over the weeks they began shaping a small boat. It wasn't large, and it had no sail yet, but its curved frame began to take shape under their hands. Eirik worked carefully, learning to let the wood guide him. Sometimes he would hum softly as he worked, the same lullaby his mother used to sing. Olaf never said anything about it, but he would smile quietly when he heard it. One afternoon, as the sky began to turn pink with the setting sun, Olaf stepped back and looked at the boat. "You've done well," he said gently. "This is your boat now." Eirik blinked. "Mine?" Olaf nodded. "Built with your hands, carried by your dreams. It is ready for more, and so are you. A soft silence filled the air. Eirik placed his hand on the smooth edge of the boat and felt something stir in his chest, a mix of pride and peace. He didn't know when he would leave, or even where he would go. But the thought of sailing one day into the quiet unknown no longer felt far away. That night, Eirik sat by the hearth with Freya. The fire glowed brightly, and the room was warm. I started building a boat, he told her softly. Freya's eyes lit up. Is it for your dream? Eirik nodded. It's not finished, but it's real now. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Can I ride in it one day? He smiled. Yes, one day. And as the fire crackled and the snow whispered against the windows, Eirik closed his eyes and saw again the silver sea, the glowing sky, and the dream that had started it all. But now, it wasn't just a dream, it was the beginning of something true. The sky above Skarn was pale and clear, and the wind that moved through the village felt soft and full of quiet promise. It was the kind of wind that didn't rush or push, it simply drifted, brushing against cheeks and coats, whispering gently as it passed. Eirik stood near the fjord, looking at the boat he had built with Olaf's help. It rested on a wooden cradle, its smooth frame shining faintly in the morning light. The boat was not large, but it was strong and carefully made. Its shape curved like a quiet wave, and every piece of it had been shaped with patience and care. To Eirik, it was more than wood and nails. It was the start of something today. The village would gather to bless it. Word had spread gently through the houses and paths. The boy who dreamed of stars and built boats with his heart was ready to begin a journey, though not yet to sail, but to be seen and supported. And in Skarn, when something new began, the people came together. Snow still lay across the village, but the sun was brighter now. Little drops of meltwater clung to tree branches and sparkled like tiny stars. The fjord, though still lined with ice near the edges, showed hints of soft water in the middle, moving slowly, like it was waking from a long sleep. Eirik smoothed his hands over the wooden sides of the boat one more time. He checked the small carved figure at the front, a bird with wings outstretched. Olaf had helped him carve it last evening, and Freya had painted the wings with soft blue dye made from crushed berries. It wasn't perfect, but it felt alive, like it belonged to the wind. The sound of footsteps on snow made Eirik turn. His mother approached, carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Behind her came Freya, her cheeks pink with the cold and her eyes full of joy. Slowly, more villagers arrived, old, young, quiet, and curious. They stood in a half circle, their coats pulled tight, their breaths making little clouds in the cold air. Olaf walked to Eirik and placed a hand on his shoulder. You've made something beautiful, he said. Now it's time for it to be part of the world. Eirik nodded. His heart beat a little faster, not with fear, but with a deep, soft feeling, something between pride and peace. His mother stepped forward, holding the cloth bundle carefully. She unwrapped it to reveal a small pouch of dried herbs, lavender, pine needles, and wildflowers gathered from summers past. These are for blessing, she said, her voice quiet but clear. Not just the boat, but the journey it may one day take. She handed the pouch to Eirik, and he stepped to the boat. Slowly, gently, he scattered the herbs along the inside edge of the vessel. The scent rose in the air, fresh, calming, full of warmth. The wind caught the scent and carried it softly toward the village. Then Freya stepped up, holding something small in her mittened hands. This is for good luck, she said, and placed a smooth stone near the seat. It had been painted with a simple symbol, a spiral like the waves Eirik had seen in his dream. It's for remembering the stars, she whispered. Eirik smiled, and reached for her hand. Thank you. The village elder, a woman named Sigrid, with silver hair and eyes as deep as winter lakes, raised her hands. Let this boat carry more than just a body across water. Let it carry kindness, courage, and quiet strength. May it always return home, and may its journey be gentle. The people bowed their heads. Some closed their eyes. The wind stirred again, softly circling the group like a ribbon. It touched hair, coats, and cheeks, as if offering its own silent blessing. A flock of birds passed high above, their wings making soft shapes across the sky. One let out a call that echoed sweetly through the stillness. Eirik looked up and felt, deep in his chest, that the moment was special, that the wind, the boat, the people, and the sky were all part of something connected. After a while, the villagers slowly returned to their homes, their voices soft and smiles kind. Olaf clapped Eirik on the back once more and nodded. She's ready, and so are you, when the time is right. Later that evening, Eirik sat beside the boat alone. The sky had turned golden, and the wind had calmed again. He traced his fingers over the smooth edge of the wood, then over the bird's carved wings. He didn't know when he would leave, or where the boat would take him, but he knew something important had happened today. He felt seen, he felt supported, and he felt the warmth of the people who believed in him. Freya came quietly and sat beside him. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "It was a good day," she said. "Yes," he whispered, "a very good day." The sky slowly darkened, and the stars began to peek through. Eirik looked at them, remembering his dream, remembering the feeling of sailing under their light, and the wind, gentle, quiet, kind, stirred once more, as if to say, "When you're ready, I'll carry you." The moon hung low in the sky, casting a soft silver light over the fjord. The snow had begun to melt, and the air smelled of early sprinkled, but no longer sharp. Eirik sat near the boat, wrapped in his cloak, listening to the quiet lapping of water against the wooden shore. The stars above blinked slowly, like they were falling asleep one by one. That night, long after the fire in the longhouse had faded to glowing coals, Eirik dreamed again. He was on the boat, the one he had built with Olaf, the one that had been blessed by the village. It floated gently on the open sea, moving without effort, guided by something unseen. The waves were smooth, the sky deep blue, and the stars above twinkled like tiny lanterns in the dark. The boat drifted onward through the night. Eirik sat in silence, his hands resting on the edge, feeling the cool air on his cheeks. The sea glowed faintly below, as if lit from within. Then, just ahead, he saw something new, an island, glowing softly in the distance. It wasn't large, but it shimmered with gentle light. Trees with silver-tipped leaves swayed in a breeze he could not feel. Small lanterns hung from low branches, swinging gently, though no one touched them. As the boat came closer, the lights became clearer, teeny orbs, floating above the ground like stars that had come down to rest. Eirik stepped from the boat onto the shore. The sand beneath his boots was warm and smooth, glowing faintly like starlight. He walked quietly, his eyes wide, his heart slow and calm. Everything felt peaceful, as though the island had been waiting just for him. A soft sound caught his ear. It was music, though not played by any hands. It floated through the air, like a lullaby made from wind and memory. Eirik followed the sound, through the trees until he came to a clearing. There, in the center, sat an old woman on a low wooden bench. Her hair was long and silver, and her eyes shone gently in the lantern light. She wore a cloak made of woven grass and fine threads that shimmered like the sea. Around her, small animals, foxes, deer, even a quiet owl rested peacefully. She looked up and smiled. "You've arrived, little dreamer." Eirik bowed his head, though he didn't know why. "Who are you?" The woman's voice was soft, like a breeze through tall grass. "I am one who listens, one who waits. You found your way here because you've been listening to." Eirik stepped closer. "Is this place real?" She smiled again. "It is as real as your heart allows it to be, and your heart is wide open." She patted the bench beside her, and Eirik sat down. The clearing glowed around them, warm and quiet. For many years, the woman said. People have come here in dreams. Some are seeking rest, some are searching for answers, some come simply to remember who they are. Eirik looked up at the soft lights dancing in the trees. And what do I seek? She looked at him kindly. You seek peace, you seek meaning, and you carry a quiet courage that not all understand, but it is strong, and it will guide you. Eirik looked down at his hands. I don't feel brave. I just dream. That, she said, placing her hand gently over his, is a kind of bravery the world needs most. They sat together in silence for a long while. The lanterns swayed slowly, the animals slept soundly, and the music continued low, calm, eternal. Before he could ask more, the woman stood. You must return now, but take this with you. She reached into her cloak and pulled out a tiny shell, smooth and white, no bigger than a fingernail. Keep it close, she said, and when the wind is quiet and you feel lost, hold it and listen. It will remind you of this place and of yourself. Eirik took the shell gently. It was warm in his hand. Thank you, he whispered. The woman nodded, then stepped back into the trees. One by one, the lanterns began to fade, and the music softened to a whisper. Eirik returned to the boat and sat once more in the center. As the boat drifted away from the shore, the island slowly disappeared into mist and moonlight. When he awoke the next morning, the sun had just begun to rise. Golden light spilled across the village, and the fjord sparkled quietly. Eirik sat up and reached into the folds of his blanket. There, resting in his hand, was the tiny white shell. He smiled softly and closed his fingers around it. The island had been real, at least, real enough to stay in his heart, and with that peaceful thought, he rose to begin his day, carrying with him the light of dreams, the wisdom of kindness, and a gentle blessing from the island of lights. The days in Skarn began to stretch longer, and the snow melted gently into the earth. Streams trickled softly between the trees, and the wind that had once been cold now carried the scent of thawing soil and pine needles. The fjord, once still and frozen, had begun to move again, slow and quiet, like someone waking from a long sleep. Eirik spent most of his mornings by the water, sitting near his boat. He would run his fingers along the wood, tracing the lines of the frame, thinking about his dreams and the island of lights. The small white shell, given to him by the glowing woman in his dream, now hung from a cord around his neck. He often held it when he felt uncertain. It reminded him to be still, to listen, and to trust. One early afternoon, while the sky was soft and gray, Eirik wandered down to a quiet inlet where the fjord curved like a cradle. This was a place few visited. Trees leaned close to the water, and smooth stones lined the shore. The wind was light, and the water mirrored the sky. He sat on a flat rock near the edge and closed his eyes. The world was hushed, but then, from somewhere across the water, he heard a sound, low, sweet, and strange, a melody that rose and fell gently, like a lullaby sung by the sea itself. Eirik opened his eyes and listened closely. The sound came again, soft and distant, but full of something deep and emotional, like longing. He stood slowly and walked along the shore, careful not to slip. As he rounded a bend, the sound grew clearer, and what he saw made him pause. There, on a smooth rock out in the water, sat a seal. Its fur glistened silver gray, and its round, dark eyes looked out across the fjord. But it wasn't just sitting, it was singing. The song wasn't made of words. It was soft and haunting, like the sound of the wind through trees mixed with the hum of waves. Eirik stood very still. He had heard of seals before, of course, but he had never heard one sing, and yet, somehow, this felt familiar. The seal noticed him, but didn't flee. It only tilted its head slightly, then continued its song. Eirik felt the sound pull at something inside him, a quiet ache, a memory of something he couldn't name. After a while, the seal slipped off the rock and into the water. It didn't vanish, but swam slowly, circling near the shore. Then, without warning, it disappeared beneath the surface. Eirik waited, watching, unsure if it would return. He stayed there for a long time, the sound of the seal's song still echoing in his heart. That night, he told Freya about what he had seen, a singing seal. She said softly, curling up beneath her blanket. "Do you think it was real?" "I'm not sure," Eirik said, looking into the fire. "But I heard it, and I felt something." "Maybe it was a selkie," Freya whispered, "like in the old stories. A spirit of the sea." Eirik nodded, thoughtfully. Maybe. As he lay in bed that night, he held the shell in his hand and closed his eyes. The melody returned to him, not as a full song, but as a longing and kind. It reminded him of the boat, of the island, and of the soft voice that told him to follow the stars. In the days that followed, Eirik returned to the inlet again and again. Each time, he waited quietly. And though the seal never returned, the memory of its song stayed with him. One evening, as he sat beside Olaf in the boatyard, sanding the final pieces of wood for the rudder, he asked, "Do you believe animals can sing?" Olaf smiled, his hands steady as he worked. "I believe everything sings in its own way," he said. "The sea, the trees, even the wind. Some people are just quiet enough to hear it." Eirik looked down at the wood and smiled. "I think I heard something true. That's the best kind of song," Olaf said. "One that doesn't just reach your ears, but your heart." Later that night, Eirik stood by the water's edge. Again, the stars above were clear, and the fjord shimmered under their light. He closed his eyes and hummed the melody he remembered, soft and slow. And for a moment, just a brief, sweet moment, he thought he heard another hum, far off across the water rising to meet his own. A harmony, a blessing in song. And with that soft connection, Eirik turned toward home. His steps were slow and peaceful, his spirit full of gentle wonder. The sea had a voice, and it had chosen to sing to him. The days were growing longer in Skarn, and the sky held the light a little later each evening. The trees near the village had begun to bud, and small birds sang soft morning songs from their hidden perches. Spring was coming, not with loud colors or rushing change, but with quiet steps, one gentle day at a time. Eirik's boat was nearly complete now. Only the sail remained. It would need to be light, yet strong, something that could carry him across calm waters and gentle winds. But more than that, it would need something special, something that came not from the hands alone, but from the heart. One afternoon, as Eirik sat outside the longhouse, carving smooth grooves into the edge of the boat, Freya approached. She carried something wrapped in a wool cloth. Her eyes were bright, and her cheeks were pink from the wind. "I have something to show you," she said, sitting beside him. Eirik smiled. "What is it?" Freya gently unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a large piece of soft deerskin, tanned smooth and pale. Across it, painted in fine lines of deep blue and silver, was a map not of land or roads, but of stars. Eirik's breath caught. "Where did you get this?" Freya beamed. "I made it. I've been working on it at night, when you were asleep." I remembered the stories Mama used to tell about the constellations. I asked Elder Sigrid too. She helped me draw them in the right places. Eirik ran his fingers across the soft surface. The stars shimmered gently in the light, each one carefully painted, each line flowing like a quiet river. It wasn't just beautiful, it felt alive. I thought, Freya continued, maybe this could be your sail, or part of it. If you sail by the stars, then you should carry them with you. Eirik looked at her, his heart full. This is more than a sail. It's a gift I'll never forget. Freya leaned against his shoulder. Then, promise, you'll take it with you, when you're ready to go. I promise, he whispered. Together, they carefully spread the deerskin on the grass. The stars shone faintly as the light shifted, and a soft breeze passed over them, lifting one corner of the cloth. It fluttered gently, as if it already knew what it was meant to be. That evening, Eirik brought the star map to Olaf's workshop. The old shipwright ran his hand over it, his eyes wide with quiet wonder. "Your sister has a good heart," he said, "and a steady hand. This will catch the wind better than any cloth I've seen." They worked together to fasten the deerskin to a simple wooden frame. The sail was not large, but it was strong and full of meaning. When it was raised beside the boat, it moved with the breeze, light and graceful. The villagers came to see it, each offering small words of praise. "A sail of stars," they whispered, "a dream carried by wind." That night, Eirik sat by the fire, the star map folded safely beside him. He held the small white shell in his hand, thinking of the woman on the island of lights, the seal's song, and the path ahead. He looked up through the window. The real stars were bright in the sky, each one in its place, and somehow they felt closer now, like they had stepped down into his life, into his hands, into the sail that would soon carry him forward. Later, as Freya lay curled on her bed, she whispered, "Where do you think you'll go when you sail?" Eirik turned to her, his voice calm. "I don't know. Maybe toward the island again, maybe farther, maybe just where the wind wants me to go." She nodded sleepily. "As long as you follow the stars." "I will," he promised. And as the fire dimmed and the room filled with the warmth of shared dreams, Eirik closed his eyes with the star map near his heart, feeling peaceful and light. Some journeys begin with a step. His was beginning with a sail, full of stars and sisters, love to guide him. The village of Skarn awoke to a quiet stillness. The wind had paused. The sky was silver with morning mist, and the sea, for once, was completely calm, so calm that it looked like a mirror, holding the soft light of the sky within it. Eirik stepped outside just after dawn. The air was cool and clean, and the usual songs of birds were hushed, as if they too were listening for something. He walked slowly toward the fjord, his boots leaving soft prints on the damp grass. His boat stood waiting, resting on its wooden frame. The sail his sister's star map was tied carefully and covered to protect it from the morning dew. Eirik stood beside it, his hand resting on the polished edge, when something stirred inside him, a feeling, quiet but clear, like a whisper not from outside, but from somewhere deep within. He turned his gaze to the sea. There were no waves, no ripples, just silence. But then, a soft sound, a hush, long and low, like the sea had taken a breath. Eirik blinked, stepping closer to the edge of the water. Another sound followed. Not loud, not sudden, just a single soft movement of water, like a sigh. It wasn't wind, and it wasn't a wave. It was something else. He listened. The sea, in its stillness, seemed to be speaking, not in words, but in feeling. A message carried through silence. It said, "Come," not a command, but an invitation, gentle, patient, warm. Eirik's heart stirred. The shell around his neck felt warm. He took it in his hand, holding it close, and closed his eyes. He remembered the island of lights, the seal's song, the sail of stars, the kindness of Olaf, the quiet strength of Freya, the peace in every moment that had led him here. The sea did not rush him. It waited, as if it understood that journeys must begin from within, not just from shore. That morning, Eirik walked back to the longhouse. Inside, Freya was still asleep, her face peaceful. He tucked a small piece of parchment under her pillow, a short note, just a few words, written carefully. "I am ready now. I will follow the wind. I'll come back, I promise." He stepped outside again, and Olaf was already by the boat, as if he'd known what today would bring. "I wondered when you'd hear it," Olaf said softly, looking toward the sea. Eirik nodded, his voice steady. "It called me." They worked together in silence, pushing the boat toward the water. Others from the village came, not with questions, but with quiet hands and kind hearts. They understood. Not all goodbyes are loud. At the edge of the fjord, the boat touched the water for the first time. It floated gently, the way it had always wanted to. Eirik climbed in, adjusting the sail. The star map lifted with the breeze, catching the light as it rose. The boat moved slowly, gliding forward without effort. Freya appeared at the path just then, her eyes wide, her hands pressed to her heart. Eirik raised a hand. She smiled through tears. The sea opened before him wide, calm, and full of promise. As the boat drifted past the last curve of the village shore, a soft wind lifted behind him. It wasn't strong, but it was steady. And in that wind, Eirik heard something. Not a voice, not a word, but a song. It was the same song the seal had sung, the same hush that had stirred the sea, the same warmth that had filled his dreams. The sea was speaking again. You are not alone. Eirik let the wind carry him forward. The boat rocked gently, the sail full of stars above him, the shell at his heart, and the sea, like a mother guiding her child, led him onward, toward whatever lay ahead. The sea stretched out endlessly before him, quiet and silver, like a great sleeping mirror. The only sound was the gentle brush of the wind through the star-woven sail, and the soft tapping of water against the wooden sides of the boat. Eirik sat with both hands resting on the edge, watching the world blur between sky and sea. There was no border now, just a wide, endless calm. It was not a place found on any map. It was not the island of lights, nor a village, nor a dream. It was something else entirely, something that felt like everything and nothing all at once. This, he thought, must be where the sky touched the water. He didn't know how long he had been sailing. The sun had risen and fallen more than once, but each morning had arrived gently, and each night had wrapped him in stars. The wind had never stopped, and the sea had never spoken in storms, only in quiet guidance. Sometimes he would close his eyes and hum the seal's song. Sometimes he would lay flat in the boat, watching the stars shift above him like soft lanterns. Sometimes he simply listened to the creak of the wood, to the distant splash of a fish, to the steady beating of his own heart. Then, one evening, as the light turned golden and soft, he saw something ahead. Not an island, not a person, but light dot. It shimmered low on the horizon, glowing gently in a circle. At first Eirik thought it was just the sun, but it didn't fade. It pulsed softly, like a heartbeat in the sky. The boat moved closer. Within the light, the sea shimmered in soft colors: blue, silver, pink, and gold, all shifting like silk in the breeze. It didn't blind him, it welcomed him. It felt like walking into warmth, into memory, into meaning. Eirik reached into his cloak and touched the shell around his neck. It was warm now, glowing faintly. He held it to his ear one last time. He heard no words, only the sound of wind and waves, but those sounds were enough. They always had been. As the boat drifted into the circle of light, something in his chest lifted. The air smelled like home, though he had never been here before. The sea beneath the boat shimmered with reflections, not just of the sky, but of his memories. He saw his mother's gentle hands, placing herbs in the boat. He saw Freya's painted spiral stone, resting beneath the seat. He saw Olaf's kind eyes, guiding him through each curve of the wood. He saw the woman of the island of lights, her hair glowing in the breeze. He saw the seal, singing softly into the fog, and he saw himself not with armor, not with pride, but with peace in his eyes and wonder in his heart. The boat slowed. It rocked gently, then stilled. The sky above was full of stars, but they weren't far now. They were close. Reached his hand over the edge and let his fingers touch the glowing water. It was warm, not hot, not cold, just perfect. The kind of warmth that lives in memory, in dreams, in love. He did not speak. He did not need to. This was not the end of his journey. It was the beginning of something deeper, something that couldn't be drawn on maps or marked with stones. This place was not a destination. It was a return. A return to the quiet within, a return to trust, to stillness, to wonder. The sky leaned low. The sea held him gently. And Eirik, wrapped in the breath of the world, closed his eyes and rested, not in sleep, but in peace, in the place where the sky touched the water, where all things come quietly home.